Well, speaking about education, taking a look at another part of the education reform puzzle, the funding for schools. This week, the Buena Vista School District shut down after it stopped getting school aid funds from the state. Now, it owed the state over $500,000 after getting money for a program it no longer ran. It's a small district, 400 kids who now have nowhere to finish the school year as of this week. So why did it get this far, and how many other small districts around the state could be in this kind of financial situation, and what needs to change? But let me start first with the question of how did it get this far that you have a district that all of a sudden shuts down and says, hey, we don't know if you guys are going to continue the rest of the year?
Well, a couple of things, bad management being one. I mean, they've lost 500 students over the last 2 or 3 years. They started out with 900, which is a decent-sized high school. That's not a school district. They went to 400. At some point before they got there, the leaders of this district should have reached out to their neighbors and said, hey, we need to join you. We're too small to be a viable school district. You ask how many? There's 50-some districts like this in the state that could, over the next year, end up in the same situation as Buena Vista is. And they need to consolidate. I mean, this district's got 400 students. It's got a superintendent. It's got other front office staff that it doesn't need. And they should be absorbed into a neighbor.
As a parent, I am furious. If my kid were in that district and they say, oh, sorry, can't finish out the school year, I would want to say, who's responsible for this?
Well, the district's responsible, but ultimately the responsibility for a free and adequate public education rests with the state. And the governor, I was shocked this week when the governor basically said, well, this is a matter for the locals to sort out among themselves.
He didn't say that. And he said we're working on a solution.
And then he said, well, ultimately this is something that rests in the state superintendent's office. I mean, this is a Prop A type moment, right? Remember 20 years ago when the Kalkaska School District sort of collapsed, and it really motivated everybody to say, look, we have got to do something different.
So what are we hearing? What's the conversation now that's coming out of this? What's the point?
The way we fund schools, the way we structure schools does not work. No. Let's do something different.
Steve, this is not a funding issue.
Sure
this district took money for 3 years that it knew it didn't have coming to it for a program that was ended, now has to pay it back. That's
this is also a district that...
But do you punish the students? Do you punish the students at the end of the year?
This is also a district with $1 million deficit of overspending over several years. Highland Park, this happened to them last year. It's going to happen to Pontiac this year. This is a funding issue. It's a fundamental funding issue. That gets to the way that Prop A doesn't work anymore.
It's not Prop A. We've got 850 school districts in this state serving $1.5 million.
Not 850, it's 540.
No, well, it's 800 and some school systems in this state serving $1.5 million students. That is far too much overhead, far too much administration. Rick Snyder's been pushing these districts to consolidate. They've resisted that. You could give these districts all the money in the world and they will still
So are they making an example? Are they making an example of Buena Vista?
No, but at some point, if you just kept writing checks to Buena Vista, they would never solve
It's
their
not about
problems.
writing checks, but
they've
it is
got to consolidate. They've got 400 students. That's the size of an elementary school.
Consolidation it's not just consolidation, it's elimination, right? We should have maybe a school district per county in Michigan, which would lower to 83, which would still be more than what most other states have. At the same time, Prop A does not work. We've been talking about this for 10 years in this state about how this was coming, that the fall off in property tax revenue, the exodus of people from the state, the confluence of Prop A and the Headley Amendment, which really confound public financing, needs to be revisited. And Rick Snyder is dropping the ball here.
20 years after Prop A, education spending
has gone
on
up.
an inflation-adjusted value almost doubled.
And
in
we've
those
cut
first
it
20
each
years.
of the last 3 years.
The actual spending, and last year we cut it, but the actual spending is way up today on an inflation-adjusted level than it was when Prop A passed. It's not funding. We've locked ourselves into legacy costs we can't pay, into supporting a district overhead we shouldn't be funding. We should be focused on how much resources we can put in the class.
Okay, so now this has started the conversation. Where are we with it? Where do you think it's going to go?
I think you
from
need the
here?
government to do something. Do something. If
Well,
it was
he's
his
appointed an
kids,
emergency
Hang on, let him
manager.
finish.
if it were his kids who were not going to get through graduation this spring, he'd be beside himself. But because it's someone else's kids, somehow this is not the sort of urgent situation that it would be for anyone else. And emergency managers are not the solution to this problem. They will come in and balance the budget. The issue is the structure and the funding.
How can you stop it before the emergency manager has to come in?
But the governor's limited by law by what he can do. He can't just simply come in here and say, okay, now suddenly I'm going to take over Buena Vista these last few weeks and write checks. And you got the Democrats saying, well, dip into the rainy day fund. Yeah, he could do that, but then next year, this time, he'd be, again, dipping into the rainy day fund to save Buena Vista. What he needs to do, what the state superintendent needs to do, because it is his jurisdiction, is come in and say, look, we're going to put these kids here for the last 4 weeks, and Buena Vista's going away, and next year, these 400 kids will be in a different school district.
I can understand that next year these 400 kids are going to be in a different school district, but putting them someplace else for the last 4 weeks of school, what kind of work do you think that they're going to be able to get done?
It's absurd.
Nothing.
And
so you might as well just close it down then.
It's an incredible unfairness visited on people who don't have any choice. And again, if this were the governor's family, he wouldn't sit still for it. I'm not sure why he should be asking anyone else to.
All right, well, we're going to see how it plays out in the next couple of weeks. No, I'm not saying that they wouldn't still get some work done for the last 4 weeks, but I would say it would be a little shaky.
I
It would be
question
a little
how much work
shaky.
they're getting done in that school district anyway. It's a disaster.